Hello. How are you,
Hey
Rachel?
Barry, how are you?
Good.
That's good. We're just waiting for a few more people to arrive here now, but then we'll get started. So for everyone who is here now, we're going to be doing a Q&A session today with Barry. So typically our coffee chats, we just kind of pass the mic over to an entrepreneur and they talk for an hour. But Barry and I had a good chat before this about a few specific things we want to talk about. So I'm going to go ahead and send the Q&A. Hey, Sarah and Molly. So I'm going to go ahead and toss the Q&A into the chat. And those are the questions we're going to run through as well. I'm also going to highlight Barry's video just so we all see him and not me. I'll just be popping my face in to ask questions. But all right, so just 1 second here. Sweet. And those are the questions I have in the chat. So I sent those, and those are going to be the questions that I'll be asking to Barry. But any questions that anyone else has throughout, feel free to send them in. And then whenever we get to the Q&A session, we'll just pop it into gallery view so we can all see each other. But yeah, if you're okay to get started, Barry, I am too.
I'm good to go.
Okay, sweet. So to get things started, I'm just going to get you to introduce yourself and your project in product management and development, right up to what you do now.
It could take a while.
Yeah.
So, as you can say, I have a few wisdom highlights. I think I need a haircut though. But yeah, so I have a few years of experience in the industry. Back in the day, microcomputers were just coming out really, and hadn't really been used too much in business. So getting a microcomputer was actually a big deal in my day at the beginning. So started out my career, I started out with Michelin tires, so got some really good experience there, mostly around process and quality. So I did work in the IT shop, but I really got a good understanding of quality and how it relates to everything. So basically, understanding the quality of a tire, you can actually see a defect and how you kind of avoid those things. So good understanding of how quality affects software and things like that. Left Michelin. I did quite a bit of consulting throughout my career. Did a lot of work with Alliant. It would have been NBTel at the time, so we implemented a customer care and billing system for all the telcos back then, which became Alliant. Then worked with a group, we called it Living Lab, so it was an incubator. It was part of what would have been NBTel, and basically I worked with a number of different companies that provided equipment and software for telcos, and basically went through the incubation process. So my idea as a kind of a project manager, program manager, was to kill bad ideas sooner and accelerate good ideas. So that was my mandate. If a company came with a bad idea, we tried to kill it as quickly as we could. But if they had a good idea, we would help them accelerate that to market. Lots of working with different size organizations. So Michelin probably would have been the largest organization I worked with. I've done work with different insurance companies and smaller telcos, and a lot of experience, experience in private and public healthcare. So I did quite a bit of work with Medivive. They went through some major transitions back a few years ago, and I was involved with that. I guess the other big event would have been the time I spent with Salesforce. So I had worked with, always been passionate about products and product development, but had worked for a few companies that were failures, which probably were the best learning experiences. But then, it can be disheartening when you put your heart and soul into something and then it doesn't go anywhere. So I decided if I wanted to work for a successful product company, maybe I should join one. So I had joined Salesforce, and figuring that that would be an excellent opportunity to gain some insight into a big, rapidly growing software company, what it takes to be successful. So I was with them for about 7 years, and then left them to basically kind of go to my own. I've been working with a couple of different companies in different types of roles. Recently, I've been working with a company in Halifax. It was funny because I started this relationship 8 years ago. So one of the founders and I went for coffee he had done at a demo camp. He kind of demoed his idea, and I thought, hey, it was a great idea, but what they were working on was an area that I had quite a bit of experience in. So we went for coffee. So I said, hey, let's go for coffee. So that was 8 years ago. So then just before Christmas, I reached out to him. So he's basically, they've taken that idea and it's transformed into a company that's probably making over $7 million a year now. So one of those things where they had a good idea. I went in, we spent a couple hours just chatting, and then I kind of reached out to them before Christmas. So I've been there since, pretty well on contract. So they're at a point now, they're just under 100 people. They're at one of those, I guess any startups kind of go through those thresholds where it's easy when it's 1 or 2 people, and then once you start getting up into the over 25, you start hitting these barriers of things that you don't expect you're going to have to deal with. So it's kind of maturity things. So they're at a point now. They have awesome people. Like I've never worked with people that are so positive in all my career. So the only thing is they just needed someone to come in and help them with process. So they're at that point where it's a little bit harder to manage. They when I got there, they had 6 squads. So we've made some changes to actually make the squads larger and drop down the number to four squads. But what I've been doing there is really coaching around Scrum and Agile methodologies. Is my primary area of expertise that I've been kind of helping them with. So that's kind of where I am in quick 5 minutes.
That's awesome. And yeah, no need to rush either, but we will have time for Q&A at the end. So I'm sure we'll probably come back to a few of those things. So yeah, I know you finished off that kind of ramble talking about Scrum. And I know a lot of our call that we had, you were chatting about some of the strategies and processes that you use in your day-to-day work as a consultant, with Scrum being one of them, and then MVPs being another big focus for you. If you want to chat a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think one of the key things, so there's a number of different Agile methodologies, but some of the key things to think about from a product, I'm talking, on the kind of the front end of is on the product side, and I've seen a lot of companies kind of struggle with getting that product out, and I think we talk about MVP and but it's to really understand what that means. So basically, to really, the objective with Agile is short iterations and getting value out to your end users as soon as possible. Like I've managed projects and been part of big programs. I remember one unnamed insurance company. So basically, the program management team had created strategies. So one of their biggest issues, I kind of came in on the end and spent a year of my life working on this project that ends up getting canceled. So I still got paid, but it's still a little disheartening that you can't look and say, hey, we did this, it got canceled. The biggest challenge was they had each strategy they created had a letter. So basically they started A, B, C. When I was there, it was Z. So basically they'd already gone through the alphabet, and that was their next big challenge, is trying to figure what the next strategic document name was going to be, right? So it was one of those things that as a project manager and as a consultant, where in that particular role, they were pushing forward with this thing. So basically, they were sinking all this money into this thing because all the VPs had their careers kind of invested in it, right? So, I mean, really, they should have made the decision that sunk cost is in there. We're not heading in the right direction. We really need to swing things around and move in a different direction. They didn't. So that was your typical waterfall approach, where we did our architecture, we did our design, we did the development, we did the testing, and then we did the implementation. It took months, years, a year before we even had something that was ready to be implemented, and it got canceled on the 11th hour. But with Agile, it's about those short iterations. And I always use a story. So I grew up, my dad, we had a small hobby farm. So we had a couple of cows and horses and things like that. So but Dad had retired, and he was down in Florida and enjoying his retirement life. And while he was away, we had a massive barn. Like, it must have been like 150 feet long by 75 feet wide, and it was like 4 or 5 stories. So it was a pretty massive structure, but it was getting quite old, and it blew down. So while he was away, and he came back, and then I came to the realization. So my dad had a wood stove or a wood furnace in the house, and he took that barn into the house and burnt it. So basically, he took it one stick at a time and brought it into the house. So if you looked at this massive thing that had to be under this big massive undertaking, he still got it done one piece at a time, multiple iterations. So basically, that's what Agile is about, is basically doing those iterations and getting the value, instead of chopping up the whole barn and then taking it into the house to burn it. It would have taken them a year or 2 years to do that, but basically cut off a piece every a couple of days or whatever, and then take it in and burn it, right? So the same idea is about Scrum. So you take a big problem and break it into the smaller pieces and get that value sooner. So basically, that's the way I kind of describe what Scrum's all about, and that whole idea that doing that minimal amount of work, that's going to keep, basically demonstrate what your capabilities are. So and the key thing is that you want to get it in the end user's hands as soon as you can. So it might not be pretty. You want those trusted relationships at the beginning, and make it really a collaborative environment that basically you have an idea, you find a good user base, give it to them, get them to try it, get that feedback, and then adapt that feedback into your next iteration of work. So basically focus on the minimal amount of work, and put off those hard things as long as possible. So a lot of people want to go in and focus on doing infrastructure type stuff. Like, you're not going to win based on that you're using Oracle or a third-party provider or something like that. You're going to win on the processes that you're bringing to bear. So if you can do something, scalability is important. So your dream is to have 100,000 users using this every day. Not on day one. Maybe what you want to do is use a spreadsheet. So I've been doing some work on, my wife is a jewelry designer, and I've been kind of tinkering around on the side, kind of developing some processes and software to help her be successful. She doesn't like using a computer, so it's not her strength. So basically, I have a spreadsheet. So basically, the whole inventory management system is now based on a spreadsheet. It's good for just me, but it's not scalable. So if I was going to kind of go down the road and make it a product, well, basically I would need to look at the scalability. So it'll work fine for maybe 1 or 2, 3 people. I get a good understanding what the processes are. It's not scalable. So I have a friend in Moncton who's a jewelry designer. So basically I can package it up and send it to her. It's not a good distribution solution, but she can get in and use it and say, well, hey, Barry, like when I do my costing, like I break out my metal costs, and then I add my, maybe I add some gems and stuff like that. So, the costing that you're doing for Tanya, who's a silversmith, won't work for me. So then basically, I get that feedback, and then, to update the system, pretty easy. I'm going to update a spreadsheet really easy and say, hey, how does this work? And she says, oh yeah, that works. And so that type of idea. So keep it simple, and get, focus on, what the minimal amount, that you can provide a user that's, they're going to see value from. So that kind of give you kind of a bit run down, at least of the MVP.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. If anyone has any more questions around any of that too, around Agile, Scrum, or MVPs, definitely send them in through the chat, and we can talk a bit more about it later. We just kind of want to get an idea of what you folks are interested in chatting a bit more about too. But I think to kind of shift the conversation a little bit to talk about entrepreneurship and the work that you do with entrepreneurs and as an entrepreneur yourself, could you elaborate on like both of those different areas? Because I know right now you work primarily as a consultant, but also you started up your consulting company, which you've been running for quite a while now, like 20 years or something like that.
On and off, yeah. So
Yeah.
I kind of flip, back and forth. So I do some of my, consulting on my own, and then another, I might get attracted to another company and come on as a full-time employee, right? So I do tend to I don't think I stay anywhere longer than 7 years. So, so that's kind of my, my magic number. It's like it's time to kind of move on and look for, new exciting challenges and stuff like that. So, um, so I just think it's throughout my career, just kind of the lessons learned that I was, as I was getting ready for this call, I was thinking, some of the situations I've come across. So one company I worked with, this is quite a few years ago now, they were developing a web-based solution before web-based solutions really had come to the forefront. So they were on the cloud in the early days, so I was brought in. I was actually hired by a law firm, so they were kind of in a bit of a dire situation. So basically, the law firm had hired me to come in on retainer to kind of turn things around. And so the first thing I would have done, working with this company, is really to make an assessment of where things were. So I spend in a case probably a week or two, kind of just going in and understanding the lay of the land and where they were and what things were in place and things like that, and look for those gaps that were missing. And I was surprised because I went in there and I was more focused on the typical waterfall project management project. They had a textbook perfect example of project management. So they had the good project statements, they had a good issue management system, they had risk management in place and stuff like that. And I'm kind of a little taken aback, like, well, they have everything they need to be successful from a project management perspective. They have a good plan and all that. So, but what really dropped the ball was the failure to execute. So basically, what the situation was is it was a 3-tier implementation. So they had a database team, they had a mid-tier team, and they had a front-end team. Those teams didn't talk. so basically, that was the biggest issue, is the fact that these 3 teams didn't talk, didn't have a good understanding what the goal was and things like that. And plus, the teams were overwhelmed with the amount of work that was assigned to them, number of bugs and feature requests and stuff like that. Like I don't even remember how many that each of the developers had assigned to them, right? So, but they didn't know what the priority was. So when I kind of took over from a delivery perspective, I unassigned everything. So basically, I said, look, you have nothing on your plates anymore. It's wiped clear, and basically went back to get the team to define what the goal was. And basically the goal was to get this thing ready for pilot. So it was for a very significant automotive manufacturer in Canada. So they had a good client, but they basically didn't have anything to show the client. So basically that's what what we had to do is basically, I said, if it's not working towards this goal, then we're not doing it. So basically, let's focus on what do we have to get, the minimal amount that we have to get done to basically get this thing out in the customer's hands so they can actually use it. So that was kind of one of the biggest wins, is basically to make that change and say, hey, let's focus on what has to get done. I think that's one of the as I was kind of thinking about the different companies I've worked with, having the team align with where you're going is the number one issue. So basically that and I kind of get back to the Scrum. So that's what about Scrum is about, is basically allowing the teams to focus on those goals. So and do it in short interactions and stuff like that. So and I always use the analogy, I don't know if you ever heard of it, but the chicken and the pig. So this chicken goes to his friend the pig, says, hey, we should start a breakfast restaurant. And the pig said, whoa, wait a second, you're involved in the process, I'm committed. So basically Scrum's the same way, is basically to get those teams committed to what they can do. So it's not mandating or dictating what has to get done. I mean, you have to that has to happen, but it's really, you win when the team is bought into being successful. So just this week, the whole idea of setting that goal. So every morning, the teams have stand-ups. So basically, we're all one team. So it's we have a product manager, we have the developers, and we have our quality analysts. And so every morning, what the teams do now, they weren't doing this when I first started, but what they do now is they talk about what their sprint goal is. So basically, when they're doing their sprint planning, so they do 2 weeks worth of work. They plan it, so they go in, they estimate what has to get done. We do a story pointing exercise. So basically, I won't get into it, but we use Fibonacci sequences to basically do their estimating. But basically, they have to come up to that one number. So the whole team has to agree that, is it a 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13 in terms of complexity. So they have to agree on that. So I don't care what the number is. It's important for kind of planning and stuff like that. But the value of that is the team actually has to come and agree that, in terms of complexity, that's a 5. So what happens is we use a online tool now called Planning Poker, and basically everybody has to kind of vote on what they say in terms of complexity. So what will happen is they get some people will say it's a 3, some other people will say it's an 8. So then what we do is basically we talk about why someone says the complexity is a 3 and someone else says it's an 8. But in the end, they come to the consolidated agreement. So basically, the dev might say, "Oh, I'm just changing one line of code. Like, this isn't very hard." But then the QA goes, "Oh, wait a second. There's like a half a dozen different interactions that are going on here. It's one line of code, but I got to test it 6 times." So then basically, they kind of agree, "Oh, okay, yeah, maybe it's it's not a, maybe it's a 5." And then maybe the dev says, "Well, hey, look, I can help. I'll do your test data for you, when we do testing," right? So then they agree upon, okay, well, this is a 5, but it's that communication. So when I kind of went through that observing mode, there was a whole lot of over the wall. So basically, the dev finishes it, throws it over the wall. So, and then QA's kind of go, "I don't know what this is," right? So basically, it's all about focusing on that communication, right? So and working as one. And the team has to drive to the goal. So that's one thing that we're always focused. It doesn't matter if QA is going to take longer. Everybody has to get this done at the end. So that kind of it's been successful, and then we kind of even the whole. The idea of the minimal viable product, because one of the teams, they had a deadline, or the marketing team had a bit of a deadline when they were going to launch this thing, and the team was late, and basically we did every sprint we do a retrospective, and the team kind of went, "Well, we spent so much time working on these low priority items, like." I always give the example, like your system needs the ability to log on or create a user. You don't necessarily need to be able to delete that user on day one, right? So a lot of those things that they could have deferred, basically focus on that minimal amount that the user requires, and then not spend so much time rounding out features that basically they can deliver in future releases. So, yeah, no, I think that's a big thing. Focus on what the goal is, and I think that's. I think one of the key marketing rules is you aren't your market. So I think a lot of people kind of get caught into that trap where they think they know their users. You don't know your users until you've actually talked to them, right? So and had them use your software. So.
Cool, sweet. So having learned a bit more about you, I have one other area I want to focus on with the questions between you and me, and then we have some really good ones from the audience. So we'll switch into gallery view and move into that for the last half. But the last question from me, just given everything we know about you and your experience, I want to learn a bit more about what advice you would give to entrepreneurs at different stages, having had experience with entrepreneurs right from that ideation stage to growth stage to entrepreneurs that maybe have tried a few different methods and now they need to pivot. So I'd love to hear your advice for someone in the ideation stage, someone in growth stage, and then someone considering pivoting.
Yeah. So I think the the idea stage is get to that right community. So if you can get tapped into that community. So I worked with one company. They did an insurance a system for insurance adjusting, and it was interesting because I was in the product management mindset at the time, and the president of the company was notorious for overcommitting, and not understanding what he was committing to. Like he probably understood what he committed to, but he wasn't able to communicate with my team or the client. So one of the challenges that would happen is he would have an idea of how this thing should work, and basically tell my team, how this is how it's going to work. But then when the end client would get it, he's going, well, this isn't what I wanted, right? So it was a constant, like, he had the president of the company, the founder, had this idea. He'd go away. We'd spend a lot of time building this thing, and then kind of throw it out to the user, and he'd go, that's not what I want, right? So we would have spent maybe a month or two working on something, and when it gets in his hands, it's not what he wants in the first place, right? So we spent a lot of effort getting something done that we, as far as we knew, like from a quality assurance perspective and from a delivery perspective, I did my job. I built exactly what I was told to build. I didn't build the right thing. so that became a major issue, and he was pretty ticked. Like I'd spend a lot of that working with that client, just talking clients off the wall and stuff like that. Like I had this massive whiteboard in my office, and I put kind of a red, all the clients, I ordered them by revenue, and then put a red star beside them saying that these are red accounts that basically we're potentially going to lose these people. So this one customer, we didn't. We had a lot. I mean, I don't fight with clients, but we had a few arguments about what you want and stuff like that. So I in my mind, I was kind of going, man, we're just losing money on this client. Like, we're putting all this effort into it, and we said we're going to do this, and then he doesn't like it. But then I start working with him very collaboratively, and started, instead of making big steps, we started taking small steps, and it really helped in our working relationship as well. So basically, I brought him in on the team, so he was part of the team. So that way, we got done, and we put a lot of effort into it, and it was around work management really. And I was thinking, man, this we lost money in this deal. So, but the way the deal set, it was a per transaction thing. So basically, we were able to take that system and optimize it based on his experience. He was 20 years of experience doing adjusting, so he knew the job. But we optimized his process, and then so he was able to put more claims through. So he had the same number of people. But he was able to do twice as many claims as he was doing before in his old system. So basically, he was putting through twice as many transactions, more transactions that we had originally planned for, right? And then in the end, he was a happy customer. He loved the software, and Tom and I are still, we try to keep in contact. So he was singing our praises. So basically, and we also gave him a deal as well. So every time he referred someone, he would get a cut as well. So he was a happy customer. He was putting through more claims than he had planned. Plus, he was outselling our software, right? So he was selling it for us. So I think that's one of the key things is find that community of users, and entrench yourself in there, and find out who the experts are, and basically use them as your test bed. So basically we proved out the solution, and it's a great marketing thing. We can say, hey, look, we work for this company in New York. This is the size of the company. They have a dozen adjusters. They were putting through maybe 12 claims a day. They're now doing 36 claims a day, right? So basically, I mean, it's an awesome, those user testimonials, definitely, the weight in gold. It doesn't matter how glossy your things are. So that's kind of the idea stage is, basically, find that community, and kind of leverage them and be part of that community. As you're kind of into the build, like I said earlier, is really focus on what's important. So anything you can put off put off those major changes as late as possible. So you know you're going to have to scale, but really focus on what your minimal number is. So if you're going to send out version 1 of your software, if you can do it in a text file in the background or something, a CSV file, do that. I mean, keep in mind as you're building this thing that you're going to have to pull this thing apart and plug in AWS or something like that. But keep it simple. Don't spend a lot of money and effort into those infrastructure things. So especially if you're looking for funding, working software, like you can show, a good investor is going to see through your slideware. so if you can kind of show them something working like that, that's where you get your wins. One client I remember, it was funny because I can't remember what the situation was, that this one company wanted to basically get an indication about how many, it was the claim system, how many claims that each of their adjusters were processing. And I made some wise ass crack about, we'll just put a little marquee. I don't know if you remember those marquees with scrolling things that go across the old HTML websites and stuff like that. So I just made some crack about, we'll just do a little marquee at the top. And one of the devs says, I can do that. It'll take me 10 minutes. So basically he implemented this thing that we just did a database call. It puts the adjuster's name and kind of the number of claims that they were processing, and it just went across the top of the screen. It's something we could turn off and on. I thought it looked pretty. I was joking. Like from a user design perspective, I would have got shot, but it met the requirement. It took us 15 minutes. I thought it looked funny, but he loved it. Other people loved it too, and so we didn't put any real effort into it, but we had a happy customer. So, but on the other side, we were working on the company I was working for. We're doing a 3rd generation product, and 3rd generation products scare me because I think the people make those decisions to drop what they have to move to a greenfield, thinking that it's going to be better. May not be the case. And so basically they had a new customer was going to buy the 3rd generation of the product, and the client was upset. They were basically they never saw any of the working software, right? And they're kind of going like, I don't even know why I'm with you guys. Like, I don't even know if you have software, right? So they really were disgruntled. So it was funny because the president brought up the software that our version that my team were maintaining, and it was one of the ones with that marquee on top, and they loved it. It was one of those things, like the stupid thing that took us no time to do actually won over the confidence of a future client, just because they saw something that gave them value, right? So that's why I say don't underestimate those simple things, right? That if it delivers value to the customer and they see the value, you're gonna win them over, right? So that kind of talks about how kind of the build stage, and then once you get into the growth, so when you're hit the 25, well, there's a few different milestones, but I think 25 people is one of the first major ones you have to deal with. So you're going to start hitting into some requirements for HR and things like that. So that's the point where you really have to start looking at your processes. So you're probably going to have a few customers under your belt, and now you're going to have to figure out how to manage them. So and then you're going to have to start thinking about customer success, and you have your end user support and stuff like that. But you're also going to have to start thinking about having a team in place that's really focused on your customer. So and I think that's one of the key things. Like, don't ever lose sight of your customers. They pay your salaries, right? So basically you want to have good customers, because if you don't, and it depends on the industry. So I've worked in industries that the companies are very collaborative, even though they're competitors, they're collaborative. And if you get a bad mark from one of them, you lose all of them. So basically you want to make sure that you focus on those customers and then have some of those hard conversations. I remember one situation Um, I was actually at a point. Well, we're going to lose all. Where the thing stood, we're going to lose all the customers. So basically, we're kind of in a bit of a triage situation where what are we going to do? So basically, I said, look, this is the deal. I'm going to make these top 10, our most valuable customers happy. But these ones down below 10, I can't guarantee that they're going to be happy. And I'm not going to really put a lot of focus on them because, we have to be in a situation where we're prepared to, fire a customer because it was just, we're not meeting their expectations, and the bad PR is going to be worse than, just trying to struggle through things, right? And you want to have your customers happy. So that was the kind of the situation where it's, I turned all the top 10 clients green, but we had to focus on basically what it took to make those customers happy. Those other ones down below my top 10 became happy because once we satisfied the top 10, those things the top 10 wanted basically were the ones lower down on the chain benefited from it. So I think that's the thing is really to focus. Like don't try to take on too many clients until you're ready. So make sure you have the right processes in place. One of the wins I did there is I actually implemented a triage process. So basically every ticket that came in that was reported, we had a help desk, and then the help desk would kind of filter out anything that was kind of end user related, like training or things like that. But any bug related, I had a dedicated person, and I told him he was not to work on anything that was going to take him longer than 2 hours. So his job was just rapid response. Go in, triage it, figure out what's going on, fix it if you can do it in 2 hours. If not, then it gets escalated. So I had another resource on standby. She worked on project work, so new features, but I didn't give her anything critical work on the projects. So then she would work on anything that was going to take longer than 2 hours to work. So we got into a situation. I was measuring how quickly we responded. So I started seeing, basically, it would take us, 2 hours to respond or 4 hours to respond. But then all of a sudden I started seeing negative responses. So basically, we were responding 15 minutes before the issue was reported. So what was happening is the help desk person didn't get it entered in the system. My triage person was monitoring the emails coming in, jumping on it, fixing it even before it got logged into our system, right? So we got into a situation, and we had it. I mean, our customers just, they love that. Like they didn't care. Like if we came back and says, oh yeah, we looked into it, we found it, it's a bug, it's going to take 2 weeks to fix it. They're happy just to know it was going to take 2 weeks, like we responded to them, right? So and then they were seeing the rapid response as well, that those quick things that we could get fixed really quick. They saw that turnaround, that hey, I reported a problem, it was fixed, the next release, right? So but the bigger things, I'd respond and say, hey, look, that issue you reported, well, it may not be an issue, it may be actually a feature request. So that would kind of have a different discussion, saying, hey, look, you've asked for this thing, you kind of reported it to the support desk. It's not a bug. It's functioning the way it is, but it's more of a feature request. And we also gave the opportunity. We would look at something and kind of look at our prioritized backlog in terms of features, and we'd say, okay, yeah, no, that fits in our strategy. We're going to do that. So basically, we're going to take that particular thing that an end user has asked for and actually bring it into our product. Or we might say, well, look, that thing that you're looking for, there's no value for anybody else but you. We'll do it as a paid feature request. So if you want that particular way of doing a report, none of our other customers do work with Lloyd's of London, so we don't need a Babbly. Everybody doesn't need a Babbly report, but this is what it's going to cost for us to develop it for your system, right? So that's kind of the thing. Get those processes in place. Focus on your end user. Make sure that you have processes in place to keep them happy. Don't overcommit. That's the biggest thing. I remember going in and I would respond to some of those bigger things, and I remember one time responding, and I went to respond directly to the client and say, hey, look, we went in, we did an assessment. This is how long it's going to take, and I gave them the date. It's going to take 4 weeks. And it wasn't like 30 seconds later, the president of the company's in my doorway going, what the hell are you doing? Like, he's going to, you can't tell him that. And I looked at him and I said, well, what do you mean? It's reality. It's what it's going to take. Like, I can't, I mean, yeah, we can promise it 2 weeks earlier than we can actually do it, but that's not going to win us anything. So he says, okay, well, you're going to own this. And it wasn't like 10 minutes later, I get an email from the client. Great, Barry, thanks. Let me know when it's done, right? So basically, he was in a situation where he was constantly overcommitting and then not being able to meet it. Now, if the customer did come back and said, hey, look, I really need this by, in 2 weeks, I can't wait 4 weeks. Well, then it's a different conversation, because then I can kind of go, well, wait a second, this is, I can't guarantee this, but let me go back. And now it's more of a collaborative thing, saying, okay, well, here's the thing, I can juggle things around and move this the top of the priority list, but tell them, hey, there's a risk that if everything doesn't go right, we may not be able to get it done in the 2 weeks. So basically now we're in a bit of a different conversation, where I'm now kind of really doing a favor for him, right? So he didn't do in that situation, but it's to have that dialogue and basically say, hey, look, yeah, we can get it done, but it's going to take a few things need to happen for this to be successful, right? So yeah, so I think another thing, I work for a company kind of in the marine area, and this client was in Philadelphia, and it was in a bad when I came on board, they sold it as an agile project, so but it was fixed price, which was a nightmare. So I kind of explained to the owners of that company, I said, this is not project management, this is containment. So basically, they agreed to do this piece of work on fixed price, but didn't spend any time doing any analysis and stuff like that, which is fine for when you're doing an agile project. You want to try to minimize the amount of documentation and stuff like that you want to do, or the work that you do on contracts. But it doesn't necessarily work for fixed price. So when you have fixed scope, so it was a bit of a bad situation, and the client wasn't happy. So I came in, and one of the things for them is we were constantly kind of making changes to satisfy the customer, but we lost focus on what we were trying to accomplish in the end. So we were making changes. The developers, it was an existing system that they were basically web enabling. The devs didn't have a deep understanding of the system, so when they would make a change, they would end up breaking something over here. So basically, what we ended up doing is again, I brought the client in on the team. We actually flew our main client to Halifax to work with us, embed it with the team, and Michael, it was good because we worked together. We figured out what the priorities were, and I'd have a daily call with the VP, and sometimes the president of our client's company would be on the call. So. But I remember one circumstances where the tide changed, where the VP was demanding this change, and her manager actually intervened on our behalf. So basically said, oh, no, we can't, we don't want them to do that. If we go in and we do that, there's this risk and stuff like that. So it was, one of those times where, when, the client actually defends your team, which was great. So, but it took, basically us breaking down those walls and being completely transparent about where we were with an end goal of getting this thing done, right? So I think that's the thing is don't be too afraid to kind of bring your client in on your own team, right? So it takes a lot of courage to do that, but you're going to get a lot of value from that as well. So.
Awesome. Definitely lots of really good advice in there. So before we end off the call, we have like 15 minutes left. There are a couple really good questions in the chat. So I'm going to cancel the spotlight video on you and pop my screen into gallery view. So if everyone else wants to do that too, it's just in the top right-hand corner, and then you'll be able to see everyone. So there are a couple questions in the chat, and since both of you are here right now, I was wondering if you'd want to ask them to Barry yourself, so that way you can introduce yourself to everyone here and we can have a little chat. And they're actually both from Startup Zone team members, so if anyone else has anything, feel free to send those in as well. But Pat, if you want to ask yours now.
I'll pass it off to Sarah actually to ask hers. I think her question's a lot better.
It's really good.
Well, welcome aboard, Sarah.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for this nice little coffee chat. Yeah, like to introduce myself, I'm the new acting operations manager at the Startup Zone. So I'll be taking over for Erin as she goes on maternity leave. I believe today is my 6th day. Yeah, it's going good so far. So yeah, my question was, you mentioned very early on that you worked with many companies that had failed, and would you say there's like a common reason for why they failed, or like would you say there's some red flags that you witnessed?
Yeah, so it kind of gets back a lot of it into the sunk cost. So basically, you have this pride of pushing things forward and you think, well, man, I spent $100,000 on this thing already. Like, so basically, if you're trying to build something that's not going to be used, you really have to kind of really look and say, look, it's time to just say, well, this isn't going to work, right, and back away from it. So I think that's one of the things, and recognizing when to make changes. So basically, putting off those hard decisions too long, it's having that right balance to say, okay, well, recognizing certain thresholds and being able to meet those thresholds. So and I think focusing on that goal, it's always the big thing. So Salesforce, I think of all the companies I worked for, they seem to have the best alignment across the organization. So they do a process called it's called V2MUM, and basically it's a process that comes from the top. So 20 years ago, Mark Benioff and Parker Harris, they wrote their first V2MUM on the back of an envelope. So basically, they talked about what their visions and values were for a company. So they were like brand new. They were working in a rented apartment apartment, right? So it's just the two of them, right? So this is Salesforce. So you can see where they've gone from working in a rented apartment to where they are today. But day one, they wrote a V2MUM. So basically, what are my values? So Mark Benioff is big on values. So he was quite young when he became successful, and spent a lot of time traveling, and he met with the Dalai Lama and stuff like that. And some of the advice was talking about you need an organization that gives back. So that's what's key to what he wanted to do as an organization. And then really define what your objectives are. And what your methods are going to be, and what your metrics are going to actually measure how successful you were. But to get that down on paper, and everybody in the organization at Salesforce does that now. So right from the top, so Mark Benioff and Parker and all the guys in San Francisco, all the executives, they write their own V2MUMs based on what the board and what Mark Benioff wants to do from an organization, and then every employee basically then splits that into things that they can do to align with that particular V2MUM. So that goes right down to the lowest level. So basically, Mark Benioff might want to say that we want to be the number one in healthcare, and by the next 5 years or something like that. So then basically it's up to the rest of the organization to kind of align with that. So Parker Harris, from a CTO or technical perspective, is going to say, well, if we're going to move into this particular new area, we have to learn all this new stuff about medical equipment or something like that. And I'm just kind of pulling that out off the top of my head, but basically, he sets it at the top of the organization, sets what we want to do, and then basically the rest of the organization has to align. And it's a rigid process. Like if you didn't get your V2MUM done, you didn't get your bonus. So that's how serious it was, right? So they said, like, this is key. We're going to align. If you don't get it done, there's going to be consequences. financial consequences, right? So we were very motivated to get this done, to meet our deadline, to get these things published. So each of the different levels of the organization would have targets to meet, and then but in the end, we had to meet that, publish it on such and such a day, or there would have been consequences. So that's how serious they take it, right? So as your organization's growing, right, and I was thinking, in terms of the whole agile and being lean, like if you have to photocopy the back of a napkin, that's perfect, right? As long as everybody knows where we're headed, right? So I mean, I've done reports before where I've actually had to corner an electrical engineer one time to get me to explain something, and he drew it out on a napkin. So I went to the photocopier and copied that napkin, and I put it right in my report. So basically focus on being lean, right? So does that answer your question?
Yeah, totally. Thank you.
Awesome. And then I think before we wrap things up, Adam wants to ask a question live too. So Adam, if you want to introduce yourself and then ask your question to Barry.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. So I'm Adam Starr. Nice to meet you, Barry. Thank you for the chat, by the way. This has been great. My business partner has an uncle who I think you might be friends with. His name is Donald Bell. You know him?
Oh, Don, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Anyway, he's been a huge help with us because we're actually trying to not reinvent the wheel, but we're introducing a plastic recycling process at StFX this year.
Oh, get out. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he told me that you're an ex-grad too, so that's phenomenal. So my like high level question is like, our scope is very idealistic, meaning we're trying to save the world. It sounds funny, but what we're trying to do is collect StFX's plastic waste that would normally end up in a landfill, and we're taking it to our workspace, shredding it, melting it, and then creating products. So every level of like the waste management supply chain is what we're trying to handle ourselves, which is way too much for two people. We're also I'm just going to give you kind of where we're at because it'll give context to my question. We're going to be in the fundraising stage for probably the next 2 years, or probably even longer than that. So we're trying to make our idea as attractive as possible to the university so they can help us financially. But to your point earlier, focusing on your MVP, like do whatever you can to get the end product out. What we would need is a blender and a toaster oven, but that doesn't seem very attractive to a university, obviously. So we've spent all kinds of money with engineers, and one of my buddies who's actually building our machines for us, so thank God for him. But we're kind of doing everything all the time, every single day, meaning our scope is just too big because we're trying to look so attractive and make it work on a beer budget, So yeah. What I'm trying to ask is just, we don't really know what we need to be focusing on right now to still look attractive, but still get our MVP.
So I think the big thing, I was fortunate quite a few years ago, I went to lunch with Francois Michelin, so the owner of the largest tire manufacturer in the world. So and we had a really good good chats about things. And one thing he had said to me is, Michelin makes tires. We don't, we could make rubber stoppers for tubs and stuff like that, but we make tires, right. And we make tires really well. So and it's about not what you're capable of, what you're really good at. So if you have one thing you're really good at, so instead of having a number of different products coming out of what you're producing, like if you can find that one thing and do it really well. So if you're making say benches for parks, right? Like do those really well, and basically use that as an example, and then figure out like maybe making park benches is where you're going to make all your money, right? You don't have to make a different, a dozen different things. And it depends, like, are you selling the technology to recycle the plastic, or are you producing the product? What, I guess, where
sorry to try to interrupt, but as you went there, I realized how I could have narrowed my question. So we're service oriented, obviously, and the way that we're trying to look attractive or to see the value of recycled plastic having a place to go that isn't a landfill we need to make products. Obviously, being in the product sector is, quite messy. So, I really think that what we're going to figure out during our waste management journey is figuring out the best way to collect, sort, and clean, because I think that's the biggest issue when it comes to waste management. But by doing that, we're directly competing with massive contracts made from GFL, for example, because they handle all of the waste. So the way we're trying to diversify ourselves in the short term is to make products so we don't directly compete. So yeah, I might have just confused you or complicated this a little bit more just by saying that, but we're not in the product sector. We're trying to sell the service eventually, meaning figure out our proof of concepts at StFX, and then we scale our process of collecting, sorting, cleaning to other universities. That's like the grand idea.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think, being able to communicate that clearly. I think, in terms of that whole environmental, positive, we're going to produce waste, but then be able to turn it into something that's useful. I think that's a great, great idea. So in terms of your kind of the technology, like, is that, one of the key, like where would you consider yourself from a technology perspective, being able to, have you come up with innovative ways for sorting and cleaning and stuff like that, or?
Not yet. That we believe that's going to be our biggest like key finding within the next few months, ideally. Like the technology we're working with now is from an open source company in Sweden. It's called Precious Plastics. We figured out all this. Max and I don't know if you know him. He's Uncle Don's nephew. But we went to Ghana, West Africa, and found this technology when we were there. So we don't have the rights to it, but we're first to market in Canada when it comes to the machines. But what we've figured out is that, okay, great, we can make machines, but that's just putting plastic back out there again. So it's all about like the service. So to answer your question, we haven't figured out, the best way to do that yet. But while making products, we need to figure out the best way to, clean. Yeah. Probably finding technology to do so. Again, Max and I are super new to all this, but we're to answer your question, really, like the technology that we have is not ours, but it's open source to anybody.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think you're kind of taking that agile approach as well. Don't be afraid to try things too. So you kind of do that minimal amount of investment and say, hey, how's this work, and get try that process. And if you have a team of people working on it, so we're in the software development, like we do these sprints, so we work on something for 2 weeks, and then at the end of the 2 weeks we do a retrospective, and then the retrospective is what went well, what didn't go well, what do we need to stop doing, what we need to start doing. So you could kind of apply those things. It's like, hey, let's try this, get that blender and we get a bigger blender or something and see if that works. And then at the end of the 2 weeks saying, oh, it didn't quite work as we had hoped, right? So those small iterations, you don't need to spend, 2 weeks, but, kind of set a goal and say, hey, look, and then doing, what's, you're not, do you have any interest in industrial engineering or any contacts? So,
sorry, like, do I have interest in pursuing that, or do I know people? Is that
know people, or yeah? So like having those industrial engineers that come in and really do process analysis and really identify where you're wasting time, I guess, and stuff like that. So that's always a kind of a discipline that Michelin always did. Is their time was always the biggest cost in tires. So basically, kind of doing that. You're looking at your process from collection right to producing the final product, really understanding what your process is and what takes the amount of time and which costs you the most money, and then say, hey, look, we spend 90% of our time washing this stuff, and we're using so much water to, it's costing us for this much water every gallon we use, right? So kind of do that Pareto analysis and say, look at your whole process end to end, say, this is where my cost point is. So if you have one thing that's costing the most money, the most you save 20% in that particular area, that's a significant saving. So you could focus on something that's using 10% of your cost, but you're only going to save a small fraction of, focus on that thing that's really taking time and effort and cost, and optimize that. So from a process perspective.
Yeah, we're definitely looking for industrial engineers to look at our process like at a whole. Max actually just walked in too, so I want to say hi in a minute. But do you know anybody? I mean, sorry to take up so much time, everybody, but I was wondering if you do know anybody in that world who could.
I can ask around. Are you familiar with the Ignite lab in Stallerton?
Yeah, we actually, Max and I we're attended with them.
Oh, good. Okay, so you know Sebastian.
Sebastian, yeah. So I know him for a while now.
He would have been the guy I would have with the contacts in that area. But I can if you want to send, I think my email's on the invite there. If you want to send me your details, I can poke around and see if I know some people in that particular area. So.
Beautiful. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Barry.
Sure.
Max just walked in too.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
How's everybody?
I hear you're Don Bell's nephew.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Am I speaking with?
Barry.
Barry. Oh, perfect. Pleasure to meet you, Barry.
Good to meet you. So.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, Barry, we'll connect after this. I'll send you an email. So thank you, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right, awesome. Good to meet you, Adam. Glad to hear you're connected with Ignite too. I was thinking the same thing, Barry. So that's awesome. Sebastian actually was registered for this, but something came up, so he wasn't able to make it. But he's a great guy.
He's got too much energy.
He's got a lot of energy. I met him first time a few weeks ago. It was fun. But he's a cool guy. I think this was great. Thanks so much, Barry, for taking the time, and thanks everyone else for coming out. Lots of great conversations.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. We'll see you soon.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.